We are one day behind.
Okie doke. Well, let me think. What should we do here? How about instead of looking at our drawing for a little while, we write some notes about what we talked about?
Let's go.
And don't worry, I'll write them really fast.
Perfect.
All right, so we are on section 3, and I'm going to call this simplified operation. Simplified operation. So now I'm curious, did you guys just take a screenshot of what I drew, or did you draw it yourself?
Both.
Nice.
I drew it.
Good for you.
I drew it and
Screenshot.
color coded.
Screenshot.
Screenshot. Did not draw it that well.
Busted out the colored pencils for it.
Air metering.
I use crayons.
All right,
Nice.
1, air metering force. Okay, so A, chamber A. Well, I should write chamber A so we know it's not just some random thing I'm writing. Okay, air meter force. Well, time for the dogs to bark. Chamber A. All right, that is regulated. Regulated air inlet. Air inlet from impact tubes. All right, let's describe that. This is a positive pressure. Pressure that tends to open the poppet valve. That tends to open the poppet valve. O-P-E, and open the poppet. Open the poppet valve. Also inside of chamber A, there is a spring. There is a spring installed in chamber A, to open the poppet valve at idle speeds. To open poppet valve at idle. At idle. All right, chamber B. Chamber B. That is, I don't know why I wrote regulated up here. It just is. I'm gonna get rid of that. Chamber B, because I wrote the same thing here, but it's air inlet from venturi. From venturi. This is a negative pressure. Negative pressure. Called suction. Suction that tends to assist A to open the poppet valve.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
Is A ambient?
Is it ambient? Definitely not. It's
Okay.
suction. It's venturi suction.
A, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, no. I'm sorry. It's not ambient. It's actually pressure. So it has to be more than ambient. So when we say impact tubes, it's like you're going down the road and you stick your hand out the window, and if you had a little straw in your hand and you kind of aim that back at you, that would be kind of a pressure coming at you, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah, because they're little,
That's
literally,
what someone said earlier, like a ram air kind of thing.
it's exactly a ram air thing. So that's a perfect way.
Oh,
If it was ambient, it would have to be behind the venturi and it would be still air, not ram. But so it wouldn't quite add to it.
Kevin,
Yeah.
must be off topic, but how many of these carburetors goes bad with so many parts?
I have never seen one go bad. When they go bad spectacular. They leak fuel all over the place and they don't work. But like I said, look at our Bonanza that is just abused year after year. I mean, it sat there for years and nobody even started it. 5-6 years. Nobody even touched it. And that's fired right up. And so that was pretty impressive. Trying to think, I didn't have a lot of customers myself that use these things. I did have one. He had a Pitts S1, the aerobatic biplane, and he had a pressure carb on his, and never had a problem with it. It was just that was his comment too. Don't ever mess with it because it works just great. And if you mess with it and it doesn't, then I'm gonna have problems. I'm like, well, I'm not gonna mess with it. So, all right, 3. This is redundant, but if I don't write it, I will lose my my outline, and then then Janet will be mad at me. Not everybody. Idle spring. The idle spring. So 1 there is insufficient AMF. There is insufficient AMF. What is AMF?
Automatic mixture control.
Very close.
air metering force?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Very strong alcoholic drink.
Very strong. What? No, AMF. How do you get alcoholic drink out of that?
It's the name AMF.
Yeah.
Adios, mother effer.
Yeah.
All right. There's insufficient AMF, air metering force, at idle. So a spring is added to hold the fuel poppet. The fuel poppet off its seat enough to get idle fuel.
And this is the same spring that you just talked about in chamber A, right?
Yes, same spring.
How do you go about adjusting that spring for idle?
Oh, we're gonna get to that. Yeah, we'll get to it. How idle mixture is that? It's different than what you're gonna think, but
So with that poppet or with that idle spring, does that mean the poppet is never like fully closed?
that is correct. And so if you're like me, you're thinking, why didn't they just make it so it didn't fully close? Why'd you have to add a spring? But they did. Well, I kind of didn't want to get into this right now, but I will because I guess it's a good time to do it. Automatic mixture control. AMC. AMC. I'm going to go back to my drawing as soon as you guys are caught up. Well, Kevin's on his phone, so I guess you're caught up there.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right. There are a couple of ways that I could create an automatic mixture control. So, but let's think about what is an automatic mixture control and why do we need an automatic mixture control?
To automatically control the mixture.
Why do I want to do that?
When you get at high altitude,
Changes in
the air's
altitude.
Okay, altitude. And what happens at altitude?
Less air.
Air thins.
Less air.
Okay, air thins out. So this is all about the airflow. So if we consider that the automatic mixture is all about adjusting for thinner air, when we look at this, we should think about, well, wait a minute, if it's all about the air, we should just find out some way to just possibly adjust the air pressure, right? Okay, so the way that you can do that, the way one carburetor does it, is they do something inside of the suction tube to help. So let me think. So what we need to do is we can lessen the force of A or lessen the force of B, we can accomplish something. But in order to do that, let me do it this way. So let me think how I want to draw this one. Make it look like something that we're going to deal with later. Okay, we can do it this way. So let's just, I'm going to make this bigger so we can kind of look at it a little easier, draw some stuff on it. There. So if we were going up in altitude and I wanted to decrease A, all I would have to do is put a restriction in here, right? And that would decrease A, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Trick question.
No,
Why would it not?
because it's still letting the same amount of volume through. It's just changing how it flows through it.
Okay. Well, let's kind of play with that thought here. I want you to think about this. Chamber A is completely filled. I mean, there's no outlet, right? So if I have air starts to coming in, okay, so I've got a little bit of room for air to go through here, but then it's allowed to squeak through. If eventually the air's just going to get through and fill this up, right? And we can think about it. It's ants. Okay, so now we've got a chamber. I don't know why maybe think of ants, but we want to get a whole bunch of little ants in this little. How do you draw an ant? A little ant right there. I want to fill this chamber full of ants. There you got a little antenna. I don't know what that is. That looks more like a plankton. That's Mr. Krabs. Okay, so what's the plankton? Plankton. That's it. Plankton. So I want to get a bunch of plankton in there from SpongeBob because of Janet's picture. That is what I guess I'm defaulting to. So I want to get a bunch of plankton in here. So without a restriction, and I don't know, how do you get plankton in there? You gotta, I don't know what plankton like. Okay, so I know. So up here in the corner,
Fly underwater.
You crash it into the ocean.
up here in the corner, I put the Krusty Krab recipe, and hopefully you're impressed to know all this stuff. So there's Krusty Krab, the secret recipe, the Krusty Krab burger.
There's only one plankton there.
I know, but we got to work it. And well, he had a what do you call it?
Family.
The clone machine, you know. So, all right. So without the restriction, all of the little planktons, right? And let's say there's room for 100 planktons in there. I'm going to get eventually 100 planktons are just going to walk in here, right? Okay. So then they're going to get in there at a certain time frame. So I get all the planktons back out, and I say, wait a minute, let's time this again and see what happens. Now I'm going to put a restriction in. Okay. So how many planktons can I get in there now?
100.
Okay. I'm still going to get 100, right? Because they're just going to squeak down through here. So maybe it takes a little bit longer for 100 planktons to get in there. I hope this is not really horrible for you guys. So it's going to take maybe a little bit longer, but not that much longer. So I get 100 planktons in there. So what? So what did my restriction accomplish? Nothing.
Just a delay.
Just slowed them down.
Did just slowed them down. Hardly and because they're so small, they were ants or plankton. That's why I was going with ants. Is they just walked right through. They didn't care. So now let's talk about air molecules. Okay, so I have enough room for 100 air molecules in there. Well, I put a restriction. How many air molecules can I get? Well, still 100. So what is the pressure going to be then? Is it going to be the same with or without the restriction?
Same?
It is exactly the same. It is not going to change anything because as long as the air molecule can make it past the restriction, it's going to, and it's just going to fill this all up. So if we go back to our water hose analogy, right? We had a water hose, and I put a pressure on this side. I had a pressure gauge on this side. I put a pressure gauge on this side, and this time I plugged the end of the hose, and so I've got water coming in here. If water's coming in at 30 psi, how much is this gauge?
30 psi.
30.
How much is this one?
30.
Okay, it is. All right, now let's erase that. Let's try the same thing, but this time Steven drove over the hose with his car and parked right on it. So thank you, Steven. So because Steven parked on the hose, I've got this giant almost kink right there, but I still got a little bit of room left over. How many PSI do I have here?
30.
30.
How many do I have here?
Still 30 if it's plugged.
30, right?
Still 30 if it's plugged. Okay. Now just see how greedy you are. Think about this. What happens if I put a little hole right there? What is this pressure here now? Is it this one?
28.
9.
Okay. You guys
Less
say
than
28,
30.
29? I like that. Okay.
29.
28, 29, 28 and a half. Yes, because some of it's leaking out. And depending on the size of the hose, it's going to be a relationship between how fast it can get through here to how fast it leaks out. Now, obviously, if I open the whole thing up, what the pressure over here is going to be almost zero. Okay, so let's take our hose analogy and all of that. So we've determined that the pressure coming through here is not going to change at all, unless, just like the hose, unless I open it up somehow. So all I have to do is open it up. Well, the best way to open something like this up is just to go like that. Okay. This is something that is critical that I have a lot of trouble with in the class. This is actually a very small passage. I should have made it much, much smaller. So, and during your oral, there is the drawing, and you're going to see the drawing a little bit that I base the whole oral on. And I will say, what is the purpose of this chamber? Or maybe some carburetors don't actually connect it like that. They just put a little hole right here. And I will say, what is the purpose of this chamber here? Or I will say, what is the purpose of this hole? And it's a bleed chamber. Without a hole, just like I had over here, without the hole that I created at the end of the hose, because I had a hole at the end of the hose, without that hole, if it's block solid, this is 30 and that is 30. Well, if I don't create a flow, whatever the pressure is here is the same here, is the same here, is the same here, and nothing changes. But because I made a little pass through, then the pressure on the downwind side or whatever, the chamber side, actually drops a little bit because there
is a flow.
Because we have a flow, and it's just going to flow through here and then flow out of here. And then it's going to flow down through here and then out that way because it's a suction. And so that is a nice way to make this orifice down here work. Without it, this orifice has no function whatsoever. And that is something that you have to really kind of look at and say, okay, I get that. Because if you don't get that, that's another one of these sticking points where the whole thing starts to fall apart. So we've got to have some sort of bleed. That's got to be a really small bleed. It's bugging me because it's so big.
That's just to lower the pressure, right?
It is just to lower the pressure in A. It's all it's doing. Without it, the orifice doesn't work. So if I ask you, what is the purpose of this chamber that comes through this little line right here? Because it's got to be very small because it's a very tiny amount of air that goes through there. I say, what is the purpose of that? The purpose of this is so that this orifice works. But the answer really isn't about the orifice, because what did the orifice get me? Nothing. It's like, why'd you put an orifice there? That didn't make any sense. A little bit ago, we were talking about of automatic mixture. Now the guy's talking about orifices. How much wine have you had to drink tonight? All right. So how can I make an automatic mixture? Well, to make an automatic mixture, I could do something kind of cool. It's really not a difficult thing here. I just take, let me see how I do this. I'll make a, oops. I'll make a needle and attach it to a bellows. And I will take that bellows and I will just have that, I don't know, attached to ambient air, just like it is. All right. And so it's bolted to something. So what happens as I go up in altitude to an aneroid, or sorry, to a bellows?
It collapses.
It's gonna,
In altitude,
expand.
it expands.
Yeah, expand.
So as I go up in
Fold the needle out.
altitude, it's going to expand. Come on, pen work. It's going to expand, and this pin is going to drive up here and make this smaller. So if it makes that hole smaller, then pressure in A gets less. If the pressure in A gets less, there's less air metering force. If there's less air metering force, it's going to close the poppet. If the poppet closes a little bit, less fuel from E gets into D. If less fuel comes into D, then less fuel is going to go up this way. This is always going to be 6. Then less fuel goes out the discharge nozzle. So that is exactly how an automatic mixture control can work in this particular situation. But I could ask you, what happens if either this hole here, if it was designed with a hole there, or this right here is blocked off? Your answer would be?
Same pressure.
Then the automatic mixture control works or doesn't work?
No, works. Doesn't work.
Does not work. It must have some sort of bleed for the air to actually be flowing. Otherwise, it's just stagnant air. And if this is stagnant air that's neither moving any which way, I could actually close this off and A would just stay the same. It wouldn't even know I closed it off unless something else changed. Unless I went down in altitude or changed throttle settings or something like that.
Hey, Kevin, before those tubes, there's a filter then, right?
Nope. No, there really isn't.
Can you explain again how the bellows works as an automatic mixture control?
Okay. So the bellows, it's a sealed container made out.
How it works, just not how it works in this system.
Okay. So it's the potato chip bag theory. If you buy a bag of potato chips down here in the valley and go up in the mountains, what happens to your potato chip bag?
Well, it's going to expand.
There you go. So a bellows does that. It's connected. Oops. It's connected. Let me see. I would have to do something like this. I'm sorry, I picked red. Be connected like that with, I need to go back, with this just being connected to atmosphere.
So how does that needle closing in affect the mixture control again?
Who's asking?
Jace.
Jace. Okay. So I had to change my screen. So how does it affect? Well, remember a little bit ago, I had a blockage.
Yeah.
Explain the whole ants getting through.
So it would just delay it, right?
Okay. So I just took away that blockage, and here's my blockage. So I go up in altitude, the aneroid expands, this pin will grow and start to block off more of the passage.
Mhm.
More and more and more of the passage, which means less and less air gets through here, and less air gets through. And because I added this little bleed through over here, because I have the bleed through, then A starts to drain into B, and A starts losing its pressure.
Oh, it loses its pressure faster. Okay, that makes sense.
Oh, good. I'm glad, because I was running out of ways to explain it. And so then I go down in altitude. I go down, and then this is going to shrink. And because it shrinks, I'm going to have more of an open passage, which means A gets more pressure. And if it gets more pressure, it opens the poppet valve more.
Mhm.
Right? Go up in altitude. Go up in altitude. My potato chip bag theory. This thing starts to grow, starts to block off more of the air coming through. And because it's bleeding out a little bit and I'm losing it, then I'm going to lose pressure in A, and that means it's going to close the poppet valve, which means that I get less fuel ultimately going through the C and D and the whole works, and I get less output. So there we go.
So does the ram air get more pressure than the B's suction in the Venturi can handle?
No, it doesn't work that way. Does the A get more pressure than B can handle? No.
Okay.
No, it's designed to work together. Let me think. There's one other way I could draw this. Let me think about this. Yeah, oh, great. That wasn't bad enough. I don't want to draw it wrong. See. What is the other way I could do this? I gotta think about that one. Yeah, it's really kind of the same thing. The only other way I could do it, one carburetor, and I'll show you. I don't want to make the point hard. Instead of putting it down here and making a whole little thing of the impact tube, I could actually do the same thing up here between A and B. I can just regulate the leak through A and B. And so the more leak I have between A and B, so do I dare erase it? So imagine that I erased all this right here. So starting all over again. Want me to do that or just leave it this way?
Leave it.
All right, so I'm gonna leave it. I could just take this, what I drew, and drew it up here between the A and B passage. And so as we go up in altitude, except it has to work backwards. And so you need an inverted needle. So that's why it gets complicated. But I'm going to show it to you on another drawing. And so it'll be fine. But you get the point. So if I just regulate air between A and B, then I've got it going on. So, okay. I could go back to my notes. And I could say something about the AMC. So automatic mixture control. We'll just put this can be installed in the impact tube, and that's like the PR58, because we're going to talk about two different ones, the PR58 and the PS5. So, and can be installed, uses a bellows. Bellows is just a bellows and needle that restricts impact pressure, takes impact pressure into A, chamber A, and let me think what else. Do this. Must have a bleed between A and B for it to work. All right, and then my last point here is V, just to make sure you know, air metering force is A plus B. Now I can talk about fuel metering force. So Kevin, you have two things running then? You have one for, it says Kevin, and then one for notes, huh? He's talking to himself. I can see his lips moving.
Microphone wasn't working. There we go. Yeah, one's for you to be able to see me, and the other one's for me to take notes and somewhat see the notes here, but yeah.
I was just looking at this little thing here because it said Kevin, it had the little, Kevin notes, but I guess you moved. So now the Kevin notes thing lost a thing. Christian, you with me? Where'd Christian go?
Yep, I'm with you.
It's curious because it said you fell asleep on me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What?
All right, fuel metering force.
Christian.
Maybe I shouldn't have woke up Christian.
Oh yeah, my bad.
That's okay. Fuel metering force. All right, so what do we have? Fuel metering force. Chamber C. That is called the metered fuel pressure. And the reason why it's called metered fuel pressure is because, wow, this drawing looks terrible. I want to go back to it. The fuel actually ran through D, through the fuel control unit, and is now being metered out of the fuel control unit. So it is regulated metered fuel pressure. Metered fuel pressure. All right. It is a positive pressure. It's a positive pressure, but works against chamber D, which we haven't talked about yet. Very important point. It is held constant. Held constant throughout the entire range of operation, by the discharge nozzle. Number 2, chamber D. Unmetered fuel pressure. I just saw Hector's note. He said I should have used monkeys to climb into that little thing instead of ants and plankton. Monkeys are too big. Chamber D. It is a positive pressure that tends to close the poppet. That tends to close the poppet. There we had chamber E. Chamber E, and I like to call that one fuel pump pressure. Fuel pump pressure. I will say that's a positive pressure that does not affect the poppet. So a positive pressure that does not affect the poppet. And that's usually about 9 to 14 PSI in that one. And that means that the fuel metering force, is D minus C. I'm gonna let everybody get caught up before I go on to the next thing here, because now what I'm gonna do is put a bunch of notes about how it works, which we've already covered, but I want everybody to kind of be able to follow along on that one.
Right, I'm good.
Wow. Either I'm getting much better at going slow, or you're getting a lot better at scribbling.
I'm not.
No, Eric?
Yeah, hold on one second.
All right. Not a problem.
Looks like we got a new Janet. No, I'm just kidding.
MJ, did you make another trip to refrigerator? God, I might have to start.
Why?
Because you might have to start social distancing yourself between your refrigerator.
What do you mean? What?
What? No, that's the problem I'm having, man. So, normally I get home at 10:30, but I'm done with you guys at what, 8 o'clock? And so
Yeah.
I go out, I have my short commute to the living room, and my wife's like, hey, you want to sit down and watch on TV, and so, okay, well, I don't like watching TV if I don't have something to eat and drink. So, now I start, hey, we got some pretzels. We got ice cream in the fridge. Look at that ice cream. Who bought the chocolate? So I'm gonna be fat when I come back.
Have PK like deliver your food.
I know. I've got my big old thing of peanuts. In fact, my son, which one was it? Jay, whatever his name is, Jay. He the other day comes, hey, Dad, what's that peanuts way up there on the shelf that I can't reach? I'm like, yeah, those are, PK bought those for me. Well, I like peanuts. Oh, would you like some of those peanuts? Yeah, I'd love some of those. And he did. All right, moving
That's
on.
the one that looks like me, right?
Yeah, he really does. Have you seen him?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. He's the youngest one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen him.
He's perpetually happy too. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just saying he looks like you. All right. So all right. Operation of air and fuel metering forces. Operation of air and fuel metering forces. All right, I'm just gonna go through it and you'll see. So as air enters, oops, I'm already off to a really wonderful start. As air enters the carb, air that is proportional to velocity hits the impact tubes, hits or enters the impact tubes. I should say, hits the impact tubes. So, all right, so it hits the impact tubes. So then this higher pressure, where is higher? It's relatively higher. This higher pressure enters chamber A. Chamber A. We'll just say it, chamber A. And I'm going to say we will give this a random value of 1 psi. Means it's not real. We're just going to say it's 1. Okay, 1 psi. Everybody follow me so far? All right. 2. As air flows the venturi, as air flows through the venturi, air flows through the venturi, a low pressure is created. A low pressure is created. We'll just leave it at that, created. So we'll say this lower pressure, this lower pressure enters chamber B. All right, so we got our impact going into A. J-Rod, what is A blank? We'll give this we will give this a random value of 1 PSI, is what that was in A. What is Thane's Jew? All right, this lower pressure enters chamber B. All right, I'm gonna write the same thing I just wrote a minute ago. We will give this a random value of 0.25 PSI. Now the thing is, it's a suction, right? But we don't have to really think about it as a suction. I'm going to go back to my drawing really quick. We don't have to think about it as a suction. And the reason why we don't is because A is pushing to the right with a value of, and I said 1 PSI, my random number. B is sucking it to the right, but I can still give it a positive value because it's doing a positive value with the work. It is moving the diaphragm between A and B to the right with a value of 0.25. So if you follow that along with that, so get rid of my hose over here.
Well, that makes sense. It's not going to have pressure in it because it's a suction.
Suction, but it's doing work. And so I'm assigning it the value of work of 0.25. So I have 1 PSI going that way. I have 0.25 going that way. So it's still moving it to the right. Even though it's a suction, it's still moving it to the right. So I give a value of 0.25.
Subtracting a negative.
What's that? It can't be negative.
But it's like subtracting a negative.
Yeah, it's like, well, if you're math majors, it's subtracting a negative, which is a positive. You're going to make somebody's brain bleed. All right, where was I here? Let's see. Okay, so we'll put those two together. Put those together. And I will say the differential pressure of A plus B is air metering force. Which I already said. And this force open or close the poppet valve?
Open.
Open.
Open is correct. This force opens the poppet valve. Opens the poppet valve. In my example, so in this example, the force is 1.25 psi to the right. And now I'm out of paper, so everybody must finish before I can move. But since it is 6:20, I'm going to end the recording.